Alright, well, I'm about to set up the drawbar on the top of the mill to do adjustments for our rods. This is where we're at to this point in time. We've trimmed everything that, initially that didn't look like part of a power drawbar, didn't need to be there. Same way with the top plate. We've got our top plate cut. We just used a piece of 1/4" plate for that. It'll set on top here, be adjusted, have our 2 screws going down through to lock it and hold alignment with the top of the drawbar. That also gives us a place for the air cylinder to work against. Once it's there and bolted in place, why that will act as a top surface. The piston will expand and drive it down. So that's the way that's going. So we're just about ready to set that up. In preparation for that, I've done a couple of modifications to the drawbar. Now this drawbar initially, let me get it loose here, or fairly loose, initially set in the top like this. It had this nut with a little bit of a flange on it to help alignment. There's not much of a flange there, but there's a little bit. And you screwed it down, and then you used this nut to finish tightening your drawbar, your collet, or whatever you had in the spindle. Now I've got a 19mm socket, which is what this is. Nice shiny new little socket, and it sets down over the top. Now, a couple of things that were concerns to me. One was this nut would have to be down partially to engage the drawbar. Now I could have lengthened the threads on it and monkeyed around and probably lost alignment on it. So what I ended up and did, and it's sloppy in the top when you ran it down through the spindle, why it wouldn't consistently align. So at the top, when you ran the spindle, why it did a little hula dance, in a circle, and it wasn't centered up. So what I did is I ran the nut up and just cinched it down against the top section of it, and then I chucked it up in the lathe and turned the shoulder so that even if it were to spin loose, why there's clearance and the socket won't interfere with it. So it could actually be floating free here, and it wouldn't make any difference. So just something that's not going to be an issue, and the splines didn't line up, so I would have had to cut those splines back or do something else. My initial thought was I was going to just thread it down off the bottom and put some sort of a spacer or change this into a different spacer, something like that. But this is pinned on. At some point it'll probably break loose, and I'll have to braze it or silver solder it back together, which I had to do on the whatever the CNC mill is. Anyway, so what I ended up and did, we've done that so there's no interference there, and then we turned a little bronze spacer. I've tapered it so it will align better into the top, and I've relieved it so it will clear their little spindle and ride against the flat on the end. So when it's in position, it sits up there just like that, and that will give the proper spacing so it will tighten down. This drawbar is actually too long. If you bottom it, you can't bottom it all the way out. So the drawbar was too long to have it be fixed. When you were using this nut as an adjustment nut, it was fine and probably necessary. But anyway, I haven't put this back in the spindle. I'm assuming my measurements are right, and I've got engagement with this length of this bronze bushing, which is just about a ½ inch of actual bushing length. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and set this back up in the mill, verify that I do have the length right, and then we're going to set the assembly up on top and bolt it into place, and then we'll figure out how long these rods need to be to give us engagement. Well, here's our initial setup. Now we're cleared over the top of our drawbar, and with this bushing setup, or spacer setup, it runs much truer. Like I say, we did a little hula dance right there before, and now it runs pretty true here, just like that. So I'm happy with that. Then when we compress our springs, it settles down on there really nicely. I think, may have to bevel this edge or bevel the inside of the socket just a little bit to get it to index up initially, but we'll get it situated and put it in place and see what it does. Now, I know I left these rods long, and I could potentially shorten them up another, 3/16 of an inch probably. I want a lock nut bolt down here on the bottom and then a lock nut on top. The reality is that falls within the parameters of where we want it to be. So what I will probably do is just take my rods and square them both up, make sure they're both exactly the same length, and then go ahead and drill and tap them in that position and leave it at that height right there. So I'm pretty happy with that. So anyway, now it's just going to be a disassemble, clean up our rods, drill and tap them, and we'll be ready to go ahead with the rest of the controls. Here we are mounted in place, and this is initial fit. We still got a little bit of hanging. We haven't got finish on or anything, and we haven't even started plumbing, but this is the basics of the system itself. And the idea is, of course, it's going to come down and snap back up when we're done. And once we put finish on this and do final assembly, we'll Loctite everything together, and it'll have to be messed around with because things are tolerances are going to be a little bit tight. But anyway, we'll put air in this, and this will be a T, but we put air to it, and it's going to drive it down just like that. And then once it's in the down position, we'll see. I've got to collet down here, so we'll see if it's gonna drop that collet. But we run her down there, and there, we've tightened up our collet, I think. Yeah, for what we've got. And if we run the other side, come on. This is not the right air nozzle we'll be doing this with. And then she should snap back out of the way. So that's where we're at for here. Alright, well, we're onto the control valve now. This is a control valve that I built for the original power drawbar for the other mill. And up and down, up and down. I'm going to build basically the same thing. I've got the connections on the back here, and my intent is to mount it up here, approximately there. Now, I want to mount it just about here. So I've gone to a little bit thicker stock. This is my piece of material, and this is a drop off of the center section of the drawbar itself, and this is the back of our body. So if I crowd the top here, I think I can mount it approximately here, so the toggle's just below in there someplace. I'll do my mounting holes down here in the bottom, and I think I've got enough material that if I'm careful, I can go ahead and put my two air fittings through the back. So they'll come directly out the back rather than having to come out and have a standoff type of thing. So that'll allow me to mount it directly up here like this. Make sure I don't lose the valves out of there. Mount it up there like that, and then mount my fittings right into the back here. I know that's not a very good view, but mount both my fittings directly into the back. I can route them straight out and up and over the tensioner and out, and looping them around the back of the mill housing and up to the drawbar at the top. There's also the air fitting that connects on there, that connects here, and I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do that. I don't know if I'm going to run a pigtail and stub it off to where I can hook it into a diverter on the column of the mill, so I can run air for both this and a air gun, or if for now I'm just going to run a fitting right to this. I'll run a pigtail. Eventually I'll have a oiler and a air regulator mounted on the tool column, and then we'll stub over to both here and probably an air line. So anyway, that's kind of the plan. We're going to go ahead, mount our body, drill for our pivot through there, and we'll use the pivot pins that were originally, I've got them on the bench there, that were originally the pivot pins for the butterfly top and bottom. So there would have been one of those pivots up here and one down at the bottom as you operated that little butterfly lever. So I'm going to use those same pins, so we'll just drill through our body and use them, and then we'll go ahead and mount it, and then we'll figure out how we're going to divert our air through it. So Alright, I managed to sneak those in there, but now what I've got to do is I've got to connect them. So what we're going to do is just angle them as much as we can, and we'll just pick the point that we can intersect that hole on both sides. So that's the plan. The best laid plans. We'll see how it works. Alright, well here's our little plate, all drilled and tapped, and we have managed to drill our ports from up here down to our holes there on both sides. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let's see if we can. There we go. And that'll be our airflow to both of them. And I've only got one fitting here, but I've got to pick up some new fittings. But they'll both mount in there, and that can mount right up, I guess, on the mill head this way. It will sit right up there. It's not a very good view, but anyway, that gives you the idea. I'm going to go ahead and mount the head, do a test fit in there, or mount the adapter, and we'll do a little. So let's go ahead and stick it together here. And we're going to use the gasket on this half because this half will have air pressure to it. And we line up our little holes where our ports match up. There we go. Of course, we'll contour our outer edges, and then our two mounting holes will go down here. There's the first half of the back. Now this is going to be, we'll mill away the other side. This is the part that will fit down in this way, and then it'll toggle up and down like that. So I'm going to go ahead and deburr this, take a couple more measurements, and see what else we need to machine away. Alright, well, I'm about done playing today. So we've been building little parts pieces. This is what we've got so far for our lever. And I know it still doesn't look like much, but, and here's our little backing plate. So the way this is all going to go together, let's see if I know how this is all going to go back together. We're going to have to completely disassemble this because I've been contouring this around the body itself, so we'll have to clean it up real good. So those will go together like that. We'll have to put our gasket and everything in, and we haven't put our springs back in, but that's all right. I can tell already I've made my lever a little bit too long. And there'll be final fit on it. There will be in, there will be out. Yeah, we're still a little bit more to relieve on there. But anyway, that's the way it'll look. Along the same lines as this one, except they're kind of reversed the way they're mounted. But this will mount on the mill just like that, with the front of the mill out here. This will bolt under the head. So anyway, that's enough foolishness for today. I'm going to go in and walk the dog. Well, sometimes I kind of neglect to tape stuff. I get started on something and thinking, well, it's not going to be very interesting and I'm not going to do very much, and so I don't know what you want to see and what you don't. But anyway, I'm back out here playing again. This is my backing plate for it. Now I think one change I have to make, I noticed it on the other backing plate for the earlier drawbar, that it had a hole right through the center here, and it just went to the outside. I believe what that is just an exhaust port. I believe it stops pressure from building up inside. I think it when you activate these levers or these valves inside, why when you let them off, you've got pressure in this whole chamber. So I think it just bleeds it off to the center and then allows it to bleed out. So I'll have to go back and put that in there. What I'll probably do is just drill a small hole through so that I miss all my goofy little ports that I put in here, and then I'll just put a channel through the backside just out to allow it to release. May not be necessary, but I think it probably is, which is probably why I put the one in the last one. So anyway, here's my little toggle button, and I've already gone and cut it out. Now I'll scallop both edges, and then I'll run a dip down through the center of it so it matches and defines it. And I'm just going to stamp the in and out like I did on the last one. If I had the CNC machine running, I'd probably go ahead and engrave it and do a fancy little engraving on it. But since I've got it in pieces, we'll do with what we've got. But, so anyway, there's the way the toggle's going to set up on there. And I had it together earlier. I may very well have to increase the spring tension on the valve plungers. They seem to be a little bit soft for the application it was actually intended for. I'm sure they work fine, but for this, it's not going to hurt to have a little more positive spring pressure to operate those valves. So that's probably something I'm going to have to do. And I just kind of radius the outside the contour. Once I get everything fitted up here, then I'll decide exactly where I want. I'm going to put 2 holes through the bottom, and then we'll smooth that out and round it. What I think I'm going to do with all of these parts, with the exception of the base plate, I think I'm just going to spray paint the same green that I've used on the tower. I might do something different, but that's kind of the plan. I think all the rest of these smaller pieces that I've got big enough to fit, I think I'm probably going to anodize them. Next thing I'm going to do, I think, is lay it out to scallop the outside edges, and then we'll dish out the center, and the outer edges will just get contoured and to match. So I've got to bevel off the edges. We're going to cut a 45 on there. We'll just intersect them to that lower corner and run a 45 on each corner to bevel those back. There's our bevels to the back side, and we'll hand finish this, smooth the edges down and everything. Then before we before we anodize it, I'll probably sandblast the whole thing or bead blast it, give it a little matted finish, and see how that comes out. I'm also testing the how well the anodize takes on different finishes. There's our up and down toggle lever. Like I say, we'll radius the edges and smooth all those edges down and see how that looks, and then we'll probably go ahead and stamp it. Actually, we'll probably sandblast it first and then go back and stamp it. Alright, we're back to everything that doesn't look like a power drawbar. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble it one more time and see how it looks and see how it acts, and maybe do a little more contouring on this back plate, and we'll go ahead and set this part of it up. Then I think we're going to figure out where we want it in the mill, go ahead and punch these 2 holes, and then we'll just go ahead and get that part of it drilled and tapped into the mill head, and then we're going to be awful close to having the mechanics of this done. Yeah, we're awful stiff through here, but we haven't put the gasket back in. Yeah, we'll go ahead and finish smoothing stuff out, get it through the sandblaster, and then see how it feels. I think we're a little bit tight through here. Of course, with the gasket on there, I may try it with the gasket. See how that works. Get in there, pup. There's control valve, gasket underneath it. I think I'm going to have to put some heavier springs in there, but we'll clearance it just a little bit more. It doesn't. That's just spring tension on the little plungers. That's, you know, you get to there and that's where it comes up to the valves. So that's what opens your valves, is that last little bit. Same way with this one. So I think we'll just put some heavier springs underneath there. I'll see what I've got. Alright, well, the dog's starting to grumble at me this afternoon, so it's about time to walk. So I'm about to wrap this up. You know, I haven't shown all the machining on this, but it's all basic machining. And with this, I just did away with everything that didn't look like it belonged to the drawbar or the control for it. So the drawbar is pretty well done. There's a little more contouring and polishing on it, but mechanically, you've seen how it's done. Actually, we will go back and show the plumbing of that. We'll do the plumbing and then do the finish on it on the final install. But anyway, our control looks like this now, and don't look at my crooked stamping on there. But where I said I thought I had to have a relief valve or a release port for the air to exhaust out of off of the center of the control here, what I did is I just drilled a hole through the center, and then I ran a ball mill down to give it an exhaust port. On the original one, why it was stood off from the side of the mill, so it wasn't backed up against it, so a hole just worked for it. This is going to sit solid against the mill, so I needed some way to release the air. So that's what we did on the back. We've kind of contoured it there maybe a little bit more, and we'll go back and sandblast it one more time. I'm going to have to do something with the control springs because they're still not quite like I'd like them to be, so we'll have to make some adjustments there. But anyway, let's go. I'll show you how I mounted it on the mill. So we've drilled and tapped the side of the head. I'd previously checked and made sure that I didn't interfere with anything on the inside. And the way this is going to mount up, we'll get in there. And when we get our spring tension correct on there, why that control lever will center itself once we get it set up. So it's going to sit just like that. I've got room to put a L, just a street L onto that fitting so it can sit up there like that so it can run out, and that's where I'll run this power supply wire or line for it. And then the 2 lines coming for the controls will sit right in the back of the come right out the back, and they'll route out and up around the top of the head up. It's going to look just like that. Just about flush. I left it just a little bit out. We got clearance for up and down, and that'll be real convenient to control it. So I'm real happy with that. We'll go back, do the final fit on it, and then, like I say, I think we'll probably anodize it up green so it matches everything else. There's where we're at with it. I'll get it finished up in the next couple of days. Like I say, we'll have to show the plumbing on it, and then we'll get it all installed and ready to go. I'm kind of excited to have it going. So hopefully you found this a little bit interesting, at least, or enjoyable to watch. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd appreciate it, and hit that like button. Share these videos if you'd like, and any comments or suggestions, leave them in the comments section for me below. And as always, guys, thanks for taking the time to watch.